There is a particular kind of quiet that lives at the east gate of Holloway Palace on a bright autumn afternoon, and I learned to stand inside it the way a man learns to stand inside his own name. The square in front of the gate is wide and paved in old gray stone, worn smooth in two long grooves where 10,000 boots have marched the same line for 100 years. The railings are black iron, gilded at the tips, and on a clear day the light comes down between the towers and lays itself across the cobbles in bars, and the bearskin on my head grows warm as a stove, and I stand in it and do not move. People think the not moving is the hard part. It isn't. The boots are heavy and the wool tunic is hot and the rifle has a weight that finds your shoulder by the second hour, but the body learns those things. The mind learns them. The hard part is the other thing, the thing nobody sees, which is staying a man while you stand there like a statue and let the world walk up to your face and do what it likes. A statue feels nothing. I felt everything. Behind the strap of the chin piece and the still mask of my face, I was awake to every footstep on the square, every child lifted onto a parent's shoulders, every phone raised, every voice that called my name though no one there knew my name. I was Guardsman Henry Calder of the Eastgate Detachment, and I had stood that post for 9 years, and I can tell you that the stillness is not absence. It is the most attention a man can pay. I had been other things before the gate. That is a part of this, so I will set it down plainly and then leave it where it belongs, which is behind me. Before the tunic and the bearskin, I spent 11 years teaching young men how to fight with their hands when their hands were all they had left. Close work. The kind of thing that does not appear in the brochures the tourists carry. I taught it in a low brick hall with a sand floor on the far edge of the regiment's ground, and I taught it because somebody had to, and because I had learned it the hard way in places I do not name at dinner. I knew, the way a carpenter knows wood, exactly what a human body can do to another human body and exactly how little it takes. That knowledge does not leave you. It only learns to sleep. When I took the ceremonial post, I made a private arrangement with myself, the kind a man my age makes and tells no one. The arrangement was this: the things I knew would stay asleep, and I would be the most disciplined man on the square, because the most dangerous men I had ever known were also the quietest, and I understood at last that the discipline and the danger were the same thing seen from two sides. So, the autumn afternoon. I want to give it to you the way it came to me, in order, because order is the only honest way to tell it, and because the man it happened to deserves to be understood and not only despised. The crowd that day was thicker than usual and louder, and I knew before I knew why. There is a hum a crowd makes when it is waiting for someone famous, a different pitch from the ordinary hum of people on holiday, and I had heard it often enough to read it. Word moves through a square like wind through wheat. Somebody important was coming, and the somebody was coming to us to the East Gate, and the cameras were already setting up, not the small phones of tourists but the real ones, on shoulders and on poles, with men beside them holding boards and wires. A woman with a clipboard was clearing a space along the railings and arguing with one of the palace stewards about where her people could and could not stand. I watched all of it without appearing to watch any of it, which is its own kind of work. He arrived in a column of black cars that should not have been allowed up the mews and somehow were, and the doors opened, and the crowd made the sound crowds make, and out of the lead car came the most famous fighting man in the world. I will call him the champion, because that is what he was and what everyone called him, and because his name has been printed enough times in the months since and does not need my help. He was a heavyweight, undefeated, the holder of a belt that men spoke of the way they once spoke of crowns. He was younger than I expected and bigger, the way truly large men are always bigger than the screen makes them, with shoulders that filled a doorway and a neck like a bollard, and a way of moving that told you, before he said a word, that he had spent his whole life being the largest thing in every room, and had decided that this was the natural order of the world. He wore a pale gray suit that must have cost what I made in a season, and dark glasses, and a watch that caught the light, And he came up the square grinning at the crowd with his arms wide as if the cheering were a coat he was putting on. Around him moved his people. There were perhaps 8 of them. A promoter, I learned later, a broad short man in a darker suit who never stopped talking into a phone, a trainer, lean and gray and watchful, who I noticed because he was the only one among them who looked at me the way I look at a thing I am measuring. 2 large men whose only job was to be large. A younger man with a camera who walked backward in front of the champion the whole time, recording his face, and others I did not sort out. They came up the square in a loose wedge with the champion at the point of it, and they came, of course, straight to me. Cameras like a guard. I have made my peace with this. We are good against the iron and the stone, in our red and black, motionless, and a famous man standing next to a motionless guard makes a picture that travels. So I expected him to stop beside me and turn to the lenses and put on whatever face he had decided to wear, and I expected to give him exactly what I give everyone, which is nothing, and I expected him to leave. I had done it 1,000 times with 1,000 smaller men. It costs me nothing to be a backdrop. A man who needs the world to look at him is welcome to use my stillness as a wall to lean his fame against. I do not mind. The post is older than any of us. He stopped beside me, close, closer than most, near enough that I could smell the cologne and the faint sourness of a man who had been drinking on a long flight, and he took off his glasses and looked at me, and something in his face changed when I did not look back. I have seen that change many times. It is small and it always comes. A man who is used to being acknowledged walks up to a guard expecting the acknowledgement that the whole world gives him without his asking, and he does not get it, and for one moment he does not understand. The understanding, when it comes, can go 2 ways. Most men find it funny. They laugh and they say something to their friends and they shake their heads at the wonderful foolishness of a job that requires a grown man to ignore them. And they take their picture and they go. And there is no harm in any of it. And some of them, the better ones, give a small nod to the post itself as they leave, which I am not permitted to return but which I keep. The other way is the way the champion went. For him, my not looking was not foolishness. It was a problem. It was a thing in the world that had failed to arrange itself around him, and men like that cannot leave such a thing alone. I knew it in the first 3 seconds. I had taught 100 young men and broken up 100-yard fights, and I knew the exact shape of the trouble standing next to me before he had said one word, the way you know whether. "Look at this," he said, not to me, to the cameras, to the crowd, to the world. "Look at this guy." The crowd laughed because he wanted them to. "You don't even blink," he said, leaning in, peering at my face the way a child peers at an aquarium. "That's incredible. That's a real talent you got there, my friend. You ever think about putting that to use? I could use a corner man who doesn't flinch." He turned to his people and they laughed on cue, the camera boy circling. "Hey, watch this," he said. And he raised his fists, and he began to box me. Understand what I mean. He did not touch me, not at first. He stood a half pace off and he threw punches into the air an inch from my face, quick and loose, the famous hands moving the way they had moved against men who had trained their whole lives and still gone down before them. And he made the sounds men make when they shadowbox, the sharp breaths through the teeth, and he grinned the whole time, and the crowd loved it. A jab that stopped a hair's breadth from my nose. A hook that swept past my ear close enough that I felt the air of it. He was fast. I will give him that and mean it. He was extraordinarily fast for so large a man, and there was a grace in it that under other circumstances I might have admired, the way I admire any craft done at the top of its kind. I did not move. I want you to sit with that, because it is the whole of the thing. A man who hurts people for a living was throwing the tools of his trade at my face from a distance of inches, and I stood and looked through him at the far railing and did not move my eyes, did not tighten, did not lean back the quarter-inch that every nerve in a body wants to lean. This is not because I am brave. It is because I had stood the post for 9 years and because, beneath that, I knew something he did not know, which was exactly how each of those punches would feel if it landed, and exactly what I would do in the quarter-second after, and the knowing made the stillness easy. It is the man who does not understand a danger who flinches. I understood it completely. There was nothing in his hands I had not already lived with for 30 years. The shadowboxing wore thin, as I knew it would, because a crowd's laughter is a fire and a man like him must keep feeding it. He stopped throwing punches and stood square in front of me and put his face very near mine, his big grin gone a little fixed, and he said low, so the cameras would lean in. "Come on, crack a smile. Nothing. You're telling me I can't get a rise out of you." I gave him the railing, the stone, the bars of light. I gave him the post. "Tough guy," he said, and the word had turned. There was a thing under it now. Real tough guy, standing there in the costume. He reached up and flicked the chin strap of my bearskin with one thick finger, a small contemptuous tap, the kind of thing a man does to a thing he has decided is not a man. How much they pay you to be a doll. There it was, the word men reach for when the stillness has begun to frighten them, though they would never call it fear. They call us dolls and statues and toy soldiers because to call us men would mean reckoning with the strangeness of a man who will not strike back, and that strangeness, to a certain kind of person, is unbearable. The trainer, the lean gray one, had stopped laughing. I noticed that. He had moved a half-step closer to the champion, and his eyes were going between the cameras and the crowd and his fighter's face, and there was something in his expression I recognized. The look of a man who has seen a thing go wrong before and feels the same wind rising and does not yet have words for it. "Champ," the trainer said quietly, "we got the shot, let's move." The champion did not hear him, or chose not to. The crowd was a wall of phones now, every screen a little black mirror with his own face moving in it, and he was no longer performing for them so much as feeding on them, and I had seen that too. The moment when the man stops being a man enjoying a joke and becomes something hungrier that the crowd is feeding without knowing what it feeds. He stepped in close again, and this time he put his open hand flat on my chest, over the brass, and he shoved. It was not a hard shove. He did not mean it to move me. He meant it to be seen. But it was contact, real contact, a man putting his hand on a sentry at his post and pushing, and I felt the old hall with the sand floor come awake very quietly somewhere in the back of me, the way a dog lifts its head without rising. I did not move my feet. The shove rocked me a half-inch and I let it, and I came back to plumb, and I gave him nothing, and the crowd went up like a struck match because now something might happen. Now there was the smell of it. "You felt that," the champion said, delighted, certain now that he had found the seam in me. "I know you felt that. Come on, push me back, tough guy, let's see it." He shoved again, harder. "There he is, there's the man under the costume, push me." Another shove, 2 hands now, a real impact that took me back a full pace before my boots found the grooves they knew and held. "Push me," he roared, and it was not a joke any longer in any part of him. I want to tell you what was happening behind my face while this went on, because the not moving makes people think there is nothing there, and there was everything there. I was counting, not consciously the way you count change, but the way an old hand counts, underneath thought. I had his weight near enough. He carried it high, in the chest and shoulders, the weight of a puncher and not a wrestler, a man who had spent his life making others come to him, and had perhaps never in his career been the one driven backward. I had his stance, which was a fighter's stance gone sloppy with contempt, his weight too far forward, his chin a touch high because he had never in his life needed to protect it from anyone in front of him. I had the distance and the angle and the line of his arms, and I had, sitting cold and complete in the back of my mind where the old hall is, the precise 3 or 4 things I could do in the space of a breath that would end this, any one of which he would not see coming, and none of which he could answer. I knew them the way you know the way home. I knew which would merely stop him and which would put him on the stone and which would do worse, and I knew that the worst of them required less effort than the least, which is the thing no one understands about that kind of knowledge, that the terrible things are the easy ones and the gentle things are hard. And I did none of them. That is the part I am proud of, if a man is allowed to be proud of a nothing. Every other thing in that square moved, the crowd surged, the cameras swung, the promoter shouted, the trainer reached, and I stood inside my own stillness like a man standing inside a bell while it is rung. And I let the discipline do what discipline is for, which is to stand between a man's power and a man's anger so that the one never serves the other. The champion's whole life was the proof that strength can be a thing you spend. My whole life, since the hall, was the slower proof of the other thing, that strength can be a thing you keep, and that the keeping is the harder fight and the only one that matters, and that no crowd will ever cheer it because it cannot be seen. The trainer reached him then and took his arm. "That's enough," he said, urgent low. "Cameras are rolling, champ. This is a guy at his job, this isn't," and the champion shook him off without looking, the way you shake off a fly, and the trainer staggered back. And in that small, ugly motion I saw the whole shape of the man's life. The people around him who had stopped being able to tell him no a long time ago. The yes that had grown around him like a callus until he could no longer feel the edge of anything. "Hold him up to me," the champion said to no one and everyone. "I want a photo, me and the toy soldier." And he turned to put his arm around my shoulders for the picture, heavy and proprietary, the arm of a man draping himself over a piece of furniture. And as he turned, half laughing, off balance, performing, his other hand came up, and whether he meant it as the last joke or whether the anger had finally closed over the top of him entirely, I do not to this day fully know, and I have tried to be fair to him in my own mind. His other hand came up and he hit me. It was a real punch, not a shove, not a tap. A short right hand thrown from close into the side of my jaw beneath the line of the chin strap, with a good portion of his weight behind it, from the most famous fist in the world. I felt it the way you feel a door slammed in a small room, a white flat shock, and then the bright ringing, and my head turned with it because I let it turn rather than fight it. And somewhere a woman in the crowd screamed, and the cameras caught all of it, every frame. The champion of the world punching a motionless ceremonial guard in the face for a laugh on a bright autumn afternoon. And here is what the cameras caught next, which is the thing the whole world has now seen, and which I will describe exactly, because the describing matters. He had hit me, and he was already turning back toward the lenses, his face opening into the grin, his arms beginning to lift in the old victorious way, certain. You could see the certainty. It was the most human thing about him, certain that the moment was his, that he had won it, that the still man had taken the blow as the still man takes everything. And that now there would be the laughter and the photographs, and the column would move on up the muse, leaving the doll standing in its costume with a sore jaw, and a story to tell its grandchildren about the day the champion knocked it. He was wrong about exactly one thing, and it was the only thing that mattered, and it was this: a punch is not the end of an exchange. It is the middle. I had taught that in the hall for 11 years, shouting it at boys who threw a fist and then stood there admiring it as if the work were done. The fist is the question. What comes back is the answer. And the answer is faster than the question if you have lived your life on the answering side. Because the man who throws the punch has committed, and the man who receives it has only to be ready. And I had been ready since the first second he took off his glasses. I did not punch him. I want that understood before I tell the rest, because in the months since I have heard it told a dozen wrong ways that the guard finally snapped, that the guard finally fought back, that the guard finally gave the bully what he had coming. None of that is what happened, and all of it misses the point so completely that it makes me tired. I did not snap. Snapping is what he did. I did not fight back, because to fight back is to enter the fight, and I had spent 9 years and a great deal of myself refusing to enter it. What I did was older and colder and far more useful than a punch, and it took less than a second, and it was the only thing I did, and it was enough. As his right hand recoiled and his weight rolled forward into his turn, committed, overextended, his chin high, every part of him moving the wrong way for what was about to be asked of him, I stepped. One step off the line, with the rifle still on my shoulder where it had been the whole time, because I never used it, and I will tell anyone who asks that I never so much as moved it. I stepped inside the arc of his momentum, took his extended arm at the wrist and the elbow with two hands that knew exactly where to be, and I used the thing he had given me, which was all of his own weight and all of his own speed traveling in a direction he had chosen, and I turned it down and around and into the stone. He went down. The most famous fighting man in the world went down onto the old gray cobbles of Holloway Square in front of every camera on Earth, not struck, not hit, not knocked out, but folded and guided down by his own momentum into a controlled and entirely unhurt heap, with his arm held just so, by a man who never once raised a hand to him. I did not drive him down. I let him fall the way I had let the shove rock me, with just enough hand on him to choose the angle, and the angle I chose was the gentle one, because the others were available and I did not want them. And I set the champion of the world onto the stone the way you set down something heavy that you do not wish to break, even though it has tried to break you. Then I let go of his arm and I stepped back onto my line into the worn grooves, and I brought myself to plumb, eyes forward, the rifle still on my shoulder, the bearskin still warm, the bars of light still falling between the towers, and I stood the post. The square had gone perfectly, ringingly silent. I have stood in a great many silences, and I knew the kind this was. It was the silence of several hundred people who have just watched the world reorder itself and have not yet decided what they are permitted to feel about it. The champion was on the ground. He was not hurt. I knew he was not hurt. I had made sure of it with the last thing I did before I let go, but he was on the ground, and he had put himself there, and everyone had seen that he had put himself there, and the seeing of it could not be taken back. There is no editing the live thing out of several hundred memories. He got up fast, the way fighters do, up off the canvas before they know if they should be, and his face was a thing I will not forget. It was not pain. It was the look of a man who has just discovered, in front of the entire world, that the floor he has stood on his whole life was never the floor he thought it was. He looked at me and there was rage in it, but under the rage, deeper, there was the other thing, the thing I had seen begin in the first 3 seconds when I did not meet his eyes, and now it had arrived all the way and there was nowhere for it to go. He had built his whole self on being the most dangerous man in any space he entered. He had just been shown, gently, without a mark on him, in front of every camera, that on this square that afternoon he had not been the most dangerous man within arm's reach of himself. He had been the second. He came at me again. Of course he did. A man does not unmake his whole life in 4 seconds on a public square. He reaches for the only thing he knows, which for him was forward, was force, was the fist. He came at me, and this time, the trainer got both arms around him from behind, and the 2 large men got hold of him, and the promoter was suddenly there shouting, and the column collapsed inward around its own point, and the palace police were coming through the crowd now, fast in their dark uniforms, because the gate is never as unwatched as the tourists believe, and there were more men coming from the lodge by the gate, and the afternoon, which had been a procession, became in the space of a minute an incident. I stood my post through all of it. That is the part that surprises people most, that I went back to the line and stood and did not so much as watch. But that is the post. The post does not end because a famous man has fallen down in front of it. The post is the thing that does not end. They took the champion away through the gate of the lodge, not in handcuffs yet but held, his voice carrying back across the square. The words I will not repeat because they were the words of a frightened man, and a frightened man's words should not be carved in stone. The crowd did not disperse. The crowd had its phones up the whole time, and the phones were already, in that first hour, sending what they had seen out into the world along 1,000 invisible wires. And by the time my relief came at the change of the watch and I marched off the square with my face still and my jaw beginning to swell under the strap, the thing was already larger than the square, larger than the city, larger than me, and was never going to be small again. I will tell you the after briefly, because the after is where the humbling actually happened, and a man should not be left lying on the stone in a story any more than he should be left lying on it in life. The blow was filmed from 11 angles. There was no version of the afternoon in which the champion of the world had not walked up to a man at his lawful post and shadow boxed him and mocked him and shoved him twice, and then struck him in the face with a closed fist while the man stood still and gave him nothing. 11 angles. There is no spin that survives 11 angles. For the first day his people tried the only move they had, which was to make it the guard's fault, to put it about that I had assaulted him, that I had thrown him to the ground, that the famous gentle giant had been brutalized by a thug in a costume. And the 11 angles ate that story alive within the hour, because the 11 angles showed, in slow and merciless clarity, a man punch a motionless soldier, and then be guided softly to the ground by that soldier's 2 hands and set down unhurt and released. The whole world watched the most violent man it knew be handled like a child by a man who never made a fist, and the whole world understood, in the way a crowd understands a thing all at once, what it was looking at. It was looking at restraint. It had perhaps never seen it before so plainly, because restraint by its nature does not photograph. It is a thing that does not happen, and you cannot film a thing that does not happen. But that afternoon you could, because the thing that did not happen was so enormous, was the destruction of a man held back at the very last inch, and the not happening of it was visible in every frame, in the rifle that stayed on my shoulder and the fist I never threw. He was charged, common assault, and then a graver count when they understood the office I held, and what striking a sentry at his post means under the old statutes that govern the palace ground, statutes older than his sport and mine together. He pleaded in the end, because 11 angles will make a man plead. The belt was a separate matter and not mine to follow, but the title bout that was to have made him the richest fighter in the history of his trade did not happen, because the men who put up the money for such things will forgive a fighter a great many sins, but they will not forgive him being laughed at, and the world, once it had finished being shocked, had begun to laugh, and the laughter was the thing that finished him, not the law. The sponsors went first and quietly, the way they always go. The promoter, the broad short man with the phone, found new talent, the way they always do. The trainer, the lean gray one, I think of him sometimes. He was the only one who saw it coming, and he was the only one who tried to stop it, and he could not, because no one around that man had been able to tell him no in so long that the muscle for it had wasted entirely, in all of them and in him. I do not hate the champion. I want to be clear about that. Here at the end, I have known many men with his hands and his hunger, and most of them were broken by smaller things than this and never learned what broke them. He at least was shown. Whether he understood what he was shown is between him and the long road he is walking now, and is not mine to judge. People ask me when they learn it was me, what I felt. They expect, I think, to hear that I felt triumph or fear or fury held in. I felt none of those, or I felt them so far down that they did not reach the surface where feeling becomes a thing you can name. What I felt, standing the post afterward with the swelling under my jaw and the square slowly emptying and the autumn light moving on its slow way across the worn gray stone, was something I had no word for then and have only one word for now, and the word is custody. I had been given, for the length of one afternoon, custody of 2 things. The first was the post, the gate, the 100 years of men who had stood the line before me and the line itself worn into the stone, and I had kept it. The gate was never breached and the office was never disgraced, and I never once raised my hand. The second thing I had been given custody of was harder, and it was this. I had been given, for the length of a single second, complete and total power over another man's body. The kind of power I had spent 11 years in a hall with a sand floor learning to wield and 30 years learning to hold. And I had been struck in the face, and handed every reason a watching world would have accepted. And I had used that power to set him down gently on the stone, and not 1 ounce more. That is the thing no camera caught, though it caught everything. The 11 angles showed the world what I did not do. They could not show how close it sat, how complete and available and easy, or what it costs to choose the gentle angle when every other angle is right there in your hands and would feel, in the moment, like justice. That is the work, not the standing still in the heat with the heavy hat, though that is hard, not the taking of the blow, though that is harder. The work is the second after the blow, the 1 second in which a man who knows exactly how to end another man decides, against every nerve and every cheer and every easy story the world is begging him to give it, to keep what he could spend. The crowd that day thought it watched a guard get knocked. Then it thought it watched a guard fight back. It watched neither. It watched a man who could have delivered any blow on earth decline to deliver one. And the declining was the strongest thing on the square, stronger than the famous fist by far. And that is why the fist ended a career, and the open hand stands at the east gate still. I marched off at the change of the watch with my jaw swelling and my face still, and I did not look back at the gate, because you never look back at the gate. You trust the next man to keep it as you kept it. The light was going gold over the towers. Somewhere far away the thing was already 1,000 times told and would be told 1,000 times wrong. Let it. The men who taught me in the low brick hall are most of them gone now, and they never got a crowd or a camera or a single cheer for the one true thing they knew, which they spent their lives teaching to boys who mostly forgot it. So I will set it down here plainly for them, and for whoever stands the gate after me. The hardest blow a strong man ever throws is the one he holds, and the only knockout that lasts is the one you choose not to deliver. He was charged. Common assault, and then a graver count when they understood the office I held and what striking a sentry at his post means under the old statutes that govern the palace ground, statutes older than his sport and mine together. He pleaded in the end, because 11 angles will make a man plead. The belt was a separate matter and not mine to follow, but the title bout that was to have made him the richest fighter in the history of his trade did not happen, because the men who put up the money for such things will forgive a fighter a great many sins, but they will not forgive him being laughed at, and the world, once it had finished being shocked, had begun to laugh, and the laughter was the thing that finished him, not the law. The sponsors went first and quietly, the way they always go. The promoter, the broad short man with the phone, found new talent, the way they always do. The trainer, the lean gray one, I think of him sometimes. He was the only one who saw it coming, and he was the only one who tried to stop it, and he could not, because no one around that man had been able to tell him no in so long that the muscle for it had wasted entirely, in all of them and in him. I do not hate the champion. I want to be clear about that, here at the end. I have known many men with his hands and his hunger, and most of them were broken by smaller things than this, and never learned what broke them. He at least was shown. Whether he understood what he was shown is between him and the long road he is walking now, and is not mine to judge. People ask me when they learn it was me, what I felt. They expect, I think, to hear that I felt triumph or fear or fury held in. I felt none of those, or I felt them so far down that they did not reach the surface where feeling becomes a thing you can name. What I felt, standing the post afterward with the swelling under my jaw and the square slowly emptying and the autumn light moving on its slow way across the worn gray stone, was something I had no word for then and have only one word for now, and the word is custody. I had been given, for the length of one afternoon, custody of two things. The first was the post, the gate, the 100 years of men who had stood the line before me and the line itself worn into the stone, and I had kept it. The gate was never breached and the office was never disgraced, and I never once raised my hand. The second thing I had been given custody of was harder, and it was this. I had been given, for the length of a single second, complete and total power over another man's body. The kind of power I had spent 11 years in a hall with a sand floor learning to wield and 30 years learning to hold. And I had been struck in the face, and handed every reason a watching world would have accepted. And I had used that power to set him down gently on the stone, and not 1 ounce more. That is the thing no camera caught, though it caught everything. The 11 angles showed the world what I did not do. They could not show how close it sat, how complete and available and easy, or what it costs to choose the gentle angle when every other angle is right there in your hands and would feel, in the moment, like justice. That is the work, not the standing still in the heat with the heavy hat, though that is hard, not the taking of the blow, though that is harder. The work is the second after the blow, the 1 second in which a man who knows exactly how to end another man decides, against every nerve and every cheer and every easy story the world is begging him to give it, to keep what he could spend. The crowd that day thought it watched a guard get knocked. Then it thought it watched a guard fight back. It watched neither. It watched a man who could have delivered any blow on earth decline to deliver one. And the declining was the strongest thing on the square, stronger than the famous fist by far. And that is why the fist ended a career, and the open hand stands at the east gate still. I marched off at the change of the watch with my jaw swelling and my face still, and I did not look back at the gate, because you never look back at the gate. You trust the next man to keep it as you kept it. The light was going gold over the towers. Somewhere far away the thing was already 1,000 times told and would be told 1,000 times wrong. Let it. The men who taught me in the low brick hall are most of them gone now, and they never got a crowd or a camera or a single cheer for the one true thing they knew, which they spent their lives teaching to boys who mostly forgot it. So I will set it down here plainly for them, and for whoever stands the gate after me. The hardest blow a strong man ever throws is the one he holds, and the only knockout that lasts is the one you choose not to deliver.